plays, but it's not. Anyway. Welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. Or as my wife said, it is the YAHOWAH vlog, since this is a video presentation rather than a blog. Even though I have blogged a lot all day today and writing at the very sites that this is presented, and we are presenting a written text in terms of YAHOWAH's testimony. So I think we can probably call it both a vlog and a blog, so long as we recognize that we're speaking in the name of YAHOWAH. This is the 18th episode of our series called Chakmah Choter. Chakmah means intelligent, and the Choter is someone that was introduced to us by Dode initially, David, the Son of God, our Messiah, our Savior, the returning King, when he in the 14th Mashal, which is a word picture or proverb, introduced the Choter, and right from the outset spoke of the fact that he was wise. This concept is mirrored by Yeshaya Isaiah as he speaks and devotes an entire chapter, the 11th, also to the Choter, and the first attribute that he ascribes to the Choter by way of YAHOWAH's Ruach spirit is Chakmah, wisdom. So this fellow that is addressing you at this point is called wise by God. And whether or not that is something that you want to agree with or not is really up to you, free will and all. But God's quite convinced that the message I am sharing with you is exceedingly intelligent. He says that I am conveying bina, understanding, that I'm doing so in a manner that is comprehensive, providing counsel of the sharing the entire story that God is conveying from beginning to end. I think that quite clearly I'm the first to ever put the entire picture together on God's timeline and his story. And that it is being presented to you, Geborah, boldly, with great passion and dedication, enthusiasm, and that it all leads to developing a respect for YAHOWAH and his name, even that it is founded on a substantial base of knowledge. So as we continue our story, as YAHOWAH explains the events of the last day and weaves the role that his Choter, who has many titles, one name, his name is Yada, but the titles are Choter. Choter is a stem off the main branch being Dode. Stem then also off of the tree of lives and of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as well as a implement of divine judgment. He is known as the Kol, voice of God. He is presented as the Bashar, herald of King Dode. He is described as the Nakri, which is an observant foreigner. He is presented as the Zeroah, which is the one cultivating the final harvest. He is an Edah, which is a restoring witness. He is described as the Adamah Parah, which is the bloody red man of the earth who is productive, also known as the red heifer. And he is presented also by Yeshaya as the man coming out of Edom, who will save many. This is the story then of how that individual plays a very substantial role in reacquainting Yehudim, not only with YAHOWAH, but also with their Messiah and returning King. He is the one who describes for them the ensuing timeline so they know exactly what's going to happen when, as we go through these next 8.5 years, so that they are forewarned, and delineates exactly what is going to transpire on each of the important dates as we move forward. He is also their conscience, sharing insights that can be derived from Yahweh's prophetic testimony when integrated with current events. It is a lot for one person to do, but it is the way Yahweh works. And for those who are Israelites and Yehudim, as is my wife, I am by association. I don't think there's anyone on the planet that can claim to be more integrated into what Yisrael means at its highest level, which is an individual who engages and endures on behalf of Yahweh, or anyone who would be claimed by Yahweh present today, who would be more Yahud, which is beloved of Yah by combining Yahweh's name with Dod's, Yah and Od, Yahud. And I know it's difficult for Jews because you are so self-absorbed a lot of the time. You are have marvelous characteristics. I mean, my entire life is dedicated to awakening you, and so I know that your God, my God, loves you, and that He wants you to return and embrace Him after a 3,000-year timeout. But you're a tough audience. You do not listen well. You're exceedingly opinionated, and if you want 10 opinions, just ask 3 Jews. You were impossible for Moshe. You treated him extremely poorly. It's horribly, every step of the way. You were horrible to Dod in his first of 3 lives, and even worse to him in the second of his 3 lives. You were rude to God. You told him to shut up and go away. You didn't ever want to hear from him again. You're a tough crowd, and that's not a positive. I have begun to write what I said to Israel on the morning of 10/7 of 23, when I anticipated that Israel would respond by invading Gaza. And I said, if you do that, it's going to be counterproductive. You're going to manufacture more Islamic jihadists than you kill. And in the process, you're going to turn the world against you. And it's precisely what's happened. And more Israelis by 2-fold have died in the pursuit of the hostages than hostages have been saved. Moreover, when you do deals with the devil and you trade with the Muslims and reward them for taking your hostages, all you do is assure that they will do it again and again and again. And so there's almost nothing that Israel is doing now that is intelligent. And that's sad, because the average IQ of Gazan Muslims is in the 60s, and average IQ of Jews is in the 115 range. And you would think that the Jews would be able to outthink the Muslims, but the Muslims are playing the Jews for fools. I read yesterday that over 60% of Jews want normalization with Saudi Arabia, evidently oblivious to the fact that that will cost Israel its survival. That not only are all Muslims devoted to the annihilation of Israel because the Quran demands it, Allah demands it, and that the first Muslims perpetrated apartheid and genocide against Jews, murdering all of the Jews in Arabia during Muhammad's lifetime. And he is the example that Muslims are told to follow. Allah is an anti-Semite. And to do a deal with Saudi Arabia will cost a Fakistanian state, a state of terror carved right out of the heart of Israel. Israel will become indefensible. And sadly, it's going to happen because the prophets have said so, and it's going to happen in the next year because that is the timing the prophets have revealed. And it's going to happen with Israeli support, which is even more suicidal still. And also 60% of Israelis are in favor of ending the war against Hamas to receive 20 living hostages back. Again, it's suicidal. Well, I would not have pursued the strategy of invading Gaza to defeat the religious foe that attacked you and attacked me on 10/7. Once you took that path, you put yourself in a position where if you withdraw at this point, then you will inspire the religious fanatics that want Israel annihilated to an extent even beyond what you're witnessing worldwide. You do what the United States is demanding and end the war, what the nations around the world are demanding. And all that will be left is the carnage in Gaza with the faded memory of what caused it. And Israel will find itself so isolated that to survive, even with the permission of most Israelis, you're going to give up the heart and soul of your country. It's going to be Trump that primarily betrays you, but you've got 60% of Israelis that love Trump. You'll listen to Trump, you'll believe Trump, and yet you won't listen to your Messiah and King or your God or their representative. Your judgment really stinks. And I have now become far more bold and saying what is obvious. Netanyahu has to go. He's too culpable in the Qatar funding of Hamas and the role that Hamas played in creating, or that Qatar played in creating and funding Hamas. He's too culpable in the failure of 10/7, which was overwhelmingly bad. He's too culpable in the division of the nation by supporting the parasites known as Haredim. He is too culpable now because he continues to pursue a winless strategy. I know there's lots of Jews that are saying, go get him, we need to wipe out Hamas. It can't be done. I'm just telling you, it can't be done. IDF is a mighty fighting force when fighting a military. That's not what you're up against there. You've wrongly identified your enemy. Your enemy is not a terrorist organization. Your enemy is Islam. It has been your enemy for 1,400 years. And until you come to know the nature of that enemy and how to fight a religious foe, which is why I wrote the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion for you. Five volumes. These volumes go through every word of the Quran and set them in the context of Muhammad's life using every pertinent hadith that was ever written. Sunnah. The most comprehensive, the best, most comprehensively documented, chronological, contextual presentation of Islam's beginning, of the Quran, of Muhammad's life, of the first Muslims ever written. It is your manual as to how you defeat the Islamic terrorists that want to annihilate Israel. Read the damn thing. I've 5 volumes. They're all free. Goddamnreligion.org, YADAYAH.com. Read it. And I didn't want to have to go back and rewrite it. It was originally Prophet of Doom, 1 volume. I wrote it 22, 23 years ago. Began it not shortly after 9/11, after I met with Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Islamic Jihad. Yeah, I'm the only American to actually meet with all of them and to survive the ordeal. And I came back and wrote Tea with Terrorists, which explains my meetings. And then Prophet of Doom, which became now the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion. And when I witnessed what was occurring on 10/7, and I knew this was nothing but a reenactment of Muhammad's raid on Kabar. It's exactly the same. And I knew there wasn't one Jew in Israel that understood that that's what it was. And that Israel would respond unintelligently. I wrote an open letter called At War with Religion. It is in the 3rd chapter of volume 1 of Goddamn Religion, called Snake. It's available at the YADAYAH.com website, at goddamnreligion.org. Read it. I've done actually 7 or 8 broadcasts as part of the YAHOWAH blog on it, so that you would know exactly what the proper course was to respond to the Muslims that invaded Israel, and so that you would not make the next invasion inevitable. But now you have, and the next invasion is going to be between 100 and 1,000 times worse. Between 100 and 1,000 times worse, because you butchered this one. I'm just sorry. I spend time on X and I watch all the pro-Jewish sites, and they're all Israeli sites. They're showing how another building in Gaza got blown up. All you're doing is antagonizing the world. And then this is a world that is very difficult for any country like Israel to survive alone, because you have 2 billion Muslims that want to annihilate you. You can't cause them to like you. You can't reform them. There is nothing you can do in that regard. That's why I wrote the 5 conditions, the 5 ways to respond. So I'm calling for Netanyahu to resign, because he wants to re-engage in Gaza. More good Jewish men and women will die. Israel will lose more prestige. You've already turned the President of the United States against you. That was inevitable. He's purchased and owned now by the Islamic despots. The MAGA is going to have to get a new object of worship, because yours has been purchased from you. And this is your plight. You cannot do what you did previously and expect a different result. You can't prioritize the return of the hostages and survive as a nation. You can't continue to lash out at a symptom of Islam and not deal with the real problem, and not lose millions of Jewish lives in the process. It is my job to tell you that story. And that's why there are many hundreds of prophecies regarding the role that I'm playing in your lives. And it's everywhere you read. I'm now translating Numbers 11. And there's a whole dissertation on the details of this job that Yahweh has asked me to do on your behalf. And I want to tell you, I know this is difficult for you to understand, and most Israelis are just going to dismiss it. But the fact is, God can't stand you anymore. He loves you and he hates you. He loves you because he's made promises to you. You are his people, and he knows he's going to ultimately reconcile his relationship with you. But he left you 2,700 years ago. Said, I'm leaving. I'm going off to heaven. I'm going to have nothing more to do with you. It's just our relationship is over. I am not going to call you my children anymore. No longer married. I am divorcing you because you were too belligerent. You were too goddamn religious. You're still thinking that your religion somehow connects you with God, and that Hashem is going to do something for you, and that you're going to have a nameless Messiah that's going to suddenly show up. It's completely ignorant. All it's doing is antagonizing God. You turn to your Talmud thinking that the Talmud is a book that is equivalent to the Torah, when it's nothing but religious trash. You got a lot to learn, and you have to start by unlearning what you currently believe. You've got all 7 of the Moed Mikre screw up. You have no idea what the covenant actually represents. You don't know God's name. You don't know who your Messiah is. You don't know who the returning king is. You have no idea who actually fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. You don't even know what Matzah represents, much less Bakurim. You don't know when the Shabuah harvest is going to occur. You don't know when the Towrah harvest is going to occur. You've got no clue as to what the Adamah Parah, the red heifer, represents. You don't know who the adulterous woman is. You don't know the purpose of Yom Kippurim, what's going to happen on that date, what year it is even, that you're only 8.5 years from your 6,000. Yeah, you're clueless on all of this. You've been misled deliberately. You've been played for fools. The rabbis are your worst enemies. Yes, I said that Islam is your enemy. Well, not for the rabbis, there would be no Islam. I don't have to tell you how they did it. Read the book. And you'll know exactly how the rabbis created Islam from the Islamic scriptures. And so since God gave up, and yet he knew that he had to return because he had made a promise to Abraham and to Sarah and to Yishak and to Jacob. And he always honors his promises, and he promised that he would reconcile his relationship and there will be a day of reconciliation. And he promised that Dowd would have an eternal kingdom and that Dowd would come back to his city. So somebody had to get your damn attention, to wake you up, to look you in the eye and say, stop being stupid. Stop erasing Yahweh's name. Stop prioritizing your Talmud over the Torah. Stop ignoring and besmirching the reputation of the Son of God and Messiah, who happens to be Dowd. Start observing the Moed Mikre as they were laid out and intended, and accept the first three as already having been fulfilled by Dowd in the second of three lives. Understand that the next fulfillment, Shabu, is only a year away. Again, like it or not, I'm the Zeroah that will cultivate that harvest. So if you want to be part of it, you need to listen. You leave a seat open for who you call Elijah. His name is Yah. Yahweh is God. And yet, you're not smart enough to recognize that Yah was famous for one thing. And that is the great barbecue of the bull that embarrassed the religious and political establishment of Israel. And he decimated them. Well, decimate means took out one of every 10. No, he exterminated them. He is the most anti-religious, anti-political spokesperson in all of the history of Yahweh's prophets. He's the guy coming back. That's the reason he's coming back. That, along with the fact that he was the master of ceremonies while the religious and political establishment during the sacrifice of a bull where Yahweh ignited the flames. And he's going to oversee the exact same thing because that is the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, which he will oversee as the master of ceremonies. Yeah, this guy talking to you, he's the Adamah Parah. You don't need to go look for a red cow. Just as when Dowd fulfilled Pesach, exactly when he told Daniel he would do so, to the day. He did not magically turn into a lamb. And he even explained 1,000 years before it occurred that he would be crucified in the fulfillment of Pesach. And then he went to great lengths to tell you exactly what he was going to do to deliver you from your religious guilt on matzah, with his soul carrying it into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again. So that the firstborn, the Bakor of Yahweh, the son of Yahweh, the son of God, could lead us into the covenant family as a result of what he has done. And yet your God-forsaken rabbinic Judaism denies that God can even have a son, even though he said so 3 times. It searches for a nameless Messiah, even though God anointed Dowd 3 times. Even though God wrote the 89th Mizmor, the most beautiful song ever written in its entirety, to sing the praises of his beloved son, Dowd. And it tells you that he is the one that's returning. You ignore it. You ignored it when he showed up to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. You don't even know what those days actually represent. You celebrate Pesach as it's your day of liberty. You celebrate Pesach as if it's a 7-day holiday. It isn't. And it has nothing to do with liberty. You get it all wrong. Matzah is the 7-day celebration. Pesach is simply the first day of Matzah. Matzah is when you are freed from religious and political corruption. Pesach is simply an extension of life. As I have said, and as God has said, I am the first to put the whole picture together from beginning to end. I know how being in Eden leads us back to Eden with the celebration of Sukkah, and how the 7,000 year timeline plays out between the exile from Eden to the exile from Mitzrayim to the exile from Babylon to the reentry into Eden. They didn't come out of the time of ignorance suddenly to know all of this. I've spent the last 24 years translating the Dead Sea Scrolls, scrubbing them of the diacritical markings that have been so misleading, making the text accurate again, providing an innovative way for you to be able to validate every word that I'm sharing with you, transliterating them correctly so that you could correctly pronounce every word that Yahweh wants you to know, including Yahweh's name. And then putting that genitive form of the word in a parenthetical so that you can look it up in a lexicon. And sometimes, even if you're a natural Hebrew speaker, you've got to look it up so that you know what the word meant at the time the word was used, as opposed to what it might have evolved to meaning. I've done all of this for you so that I would have that base of knowledge, and then from that base of knowledge to make the connections necessary to understand, so that in these 35 books that sit on the shelf behind me, all free at YAHOWAH.com, I'm not trying to make a nickel off you. I don't even take donations. I wouldn't take your money if you gave it to me. I'm here to tell you the truth. I'm here to represent Yahweh and his beloved son, Dod, and the path to God so that you can come home before it's too late. I'm calling you out of the Babel of religion and politics. And it is because, after having written these 35 books over the ensuing 23 years, that in this December, Yahweh told me as clearly as words allow, "You've written enough, young man. It's time you speak directly to my people. You are now those books. It's important you tell them what you know about me, about my son, about them." And that's when we began the YAHOWAH blog. I'm a guy that hadn't posted a single word in social media in my entire life. And now we have YouTube channels and a Facebook site and X, Rumble, hundreds of hours of video blog production telling you the truth about Yahweh. Website that has all of these books available to you free, and tens of thousands of posts between X and Facebook. Facebook is our favorite venue. All for you. To call you home, to get your attention. To tell you, after doing the same thing for 3,000 years, you don't want to continue it. Just like I said regarding Netanyahu and his war in Gaza, that it is insane to think you can go back and do what you have previously done and expect a different result. You've been doing the same thing, being religious and antagonizing God, being political and antagonizing God, erasing Yahweh's name, denying the greatest gift ever given, the Son of God did for you on Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And if you continue it, you're going to get exactly the same result, but you're not going to make it to Yom Kippurim. And if you were among the few who survived to that point, God's not going to let you participate. It'll be too late. So you want to listen now. So those who are currently alienated and distant, Rakok, which would be 99.99% of Israelites and Yehudim. Now, you might wonder, why am I only speaking to 0.2% of the world's population, and recognizing that my foe, Paul, Shaul, claimed that the 99.8% of the world's population was his. My role was initially to communicate to both Goyim and Yehudim. And I have. And I have made it very clear that if you are a Goyim and that you embrace Yisrael, you identify with Yisrael, you support Yisrael, you study the Torah that was revealed to Yisrael, you come to know and love the God of Yisrael, Yahweh, and you come to embrace the most Yehud of all Yehud, Dod, and understand what he has done for his people. And you appreciate the fact that the covenant was established with Yisrael, then you too can be part of this covenant family. But we've reached the point now of no return. We've come to the point where I cannot be coy. I cannot have a broad message. I need to get, and I must get, and I will get Israel's attention, the attention of Jews. Now, I'm not trying to get the attention of the overtly political. If you're part of that obnoxious Jewish group that is progressive, and you've turned against your own people and your ethnicity, and you have partnered with the murderous Muslims that are rapists and pedophiles, terrorists and mass murderers, you are too disgusting to ever want to spend any time with on this planet, much less in eternity. I have no interest in you. I am not talking to you. Go away. I don't want to hear your comments. I have zero interest in you. God has zero interest in you. You're not salvageable. Evidence and reason don't mean anything to you, and that is the only way to know God. And if you are ultra-Orthodox, whether it's Haredim or you use a different name because you live in New York and not in Israel, there is no chance we are going to resonate and we're going to find an accommodation either. God hates religion and you are religious. God hates parasites and you are parasitical. God has to be known by name, and he despises the Talmud and religious traditions. And you're not being educated, particularly in the Haredim and even the Orthodox Jewish community in New York. You're just not being educated to the point you're going to understand anything I'm saying anyway. You're not going to be able to read it. You're not going to be able to process it. And the last thing God wants, you can look at what he did when Aaron and the first children of Israel played religion with the golden calf. He annihilated them. What happened when Eliah went toe-to-toe with the Lord? It's called Baal, but that's the same meaning as Adonai. And against Asherah. He killed them all. You know, the debate was funny, humorous, brilliant, but in the end, he killed them all. God doesn't change. If you're overtly religious or overtly political, there's no hope for you. God's going to end your lives, even if you survive to the conclusion of the time of Jacob's troubles, which begins on Shabuah in 2026, May 22nd, so you don't have to look it up. And it ends on Towrah in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033. It'll be September 24th, to the backdrop of a full solar eclipse. It's a lot you have to do if you're going to shed your religious influence, political influence, and devote yourself to knowing who Yahweh is, what he's offering, before the situation gets almost infinitely worse than it is right now. Prophet Yoel says that the conditions that will be experienced by Israelis and Jews worldwide, beginning on May 22nd, Shabuah, 7 years before the end of this time of Jacob's troubles, will be worse than at any time in the history of humankind. It's worse than the Holocaust is what you're headed to. And I am your lone means out of this. Now, I'm only the means out because I'm speaking for Yahweh. I'm representing his beloved son, David, your king. And so my words only matter because they convey their words. So those who are currently alienated and distant will come and return, will be included. God has already told us the outcome. What I'm sharing with you will resonate with many of you. Not all of you, but with many of you. It should with most of you, but it won't. But it would be in your best interest to be among the few. And they will help build the royal residence, the temple, for engaging and enduring in the home of Yahweh. There is a whole gaggle of Jews that think that they want to build the third temple, but they don't have the balls to destroy the dome of ignorance and apartheid, the trophy to Satan's conquest of Allah's temple, or the mosque of rage and death. And I'm here to tell you that until you cleanse the Temple Mount of all traces of religion, no one's going to build a temple for Yahweh. He's allergic to religion. And until you stop praying at the Western Wall, there's not going to be a home for Yahweh's name. It's going to have to listen to that clamor. And so what you don't know is that Yahweh's prophets spoke vociferously as to precisely what's going to happen earlier in this text. And I am sharing now from Zechariah, the 6th chapter. We were told explicitly that it would be Dod that would return and have the honor of building the final home for the covenant family and for Yahweh's name. But you can't live in it unless you're part of the covenant. There's 5 conditions, and the first prerequisite requires you to walk away from religion and politics, away from Babylon. And you can't live in the home for Yahweh's name unless you embrace Yahweh's name. And you can't just stop being alienated and distant, which means you can't be religious and political if you're going to return. And you've got to know who your Messiah is if you're going to be part of those who work with him to build the royal residence and the temple. I know this is a lot. It's a lot to process. You know, I'm not here telling you one tiny sliver of the whole picture. You know, I could tell you that Dod is the real Messiah. Okay. Well, that's one of a 100,000 things that I have come to know. I can tell you that Yahweh is Yahweh's name, and I can prove the pronunciation. That's a big deal. I'm the first person to do it in at least 2,500 years, but that's just one very big piece of this. I can tell you that there are 3 destinations for human souls, and not just heaven and hell, and that most souls simply cease to exist. They're not rewarded. They're not punished. First person to ever perceive that from Yahweh's testimony, and yet it's obvious. I can tell you there's 5 conditions of the covenant, delineate each of them, 5 benefits of the covenant, to even tell you how they are delivered through the first 3 Moed Mikre that Dode fulfilled. I can tell you that it was that Dode in his second of 3 lives fulfilled the first 3 Mikre in 33 CE, which is year 4000. Yeah, I can go on and give you thousands of insights, and your brains would just, because you got to start where you need to start. And where you need to start is to be among those who return. You can't be among those who remain alienated and distant. Let's take it one step at a time. And the second step you need, once you have disassociated yourself from rabbinic Judaism and the cultural of Judaism, and also are willing to acknowledge that Christianity is a complete farce from beginning to end. That's another insight that I'm the first to actually be able to prove there was no Jesus. Never was a Christ. The myth was conceived and perpetrated by Paul, who began writing in 52 CE, and the rabbis were just too damn ignorant to get in his way. Because all he did is counterfeit through identity theft, David, and then added a heavy dose of Dionysus. But he piled his crap right on top of the truth about the actual Messiah and Son of God, who was Dode. And unfortunately, the founder of Rabbinic Judaism, Bar Kokhba, made matters worse by fighting one false Messiah with another one and brought you Bar Kokhba, from which you get the star that you wear so proudly. Even though that was Bar Kokhba's star, and even though that was the sign under which Roman Catholics, Muslims, and Nazis tormented you. Thousands and thousands of these insights. And then you will know Yada and understand. I'm Yada. And then you will know Yada and understand that indeed Yahweh of these spiritual messengers has sent me to you. He has. And he told you it hundreds of times, beginning even in the Torah. This will ultimately occur if and when you begin to consistently and actually listen to the cold voice of Yahweh, your God. Once again, I am that voice. I don't say that for me. In fact, it makes my life much more difficult to convey this to you. I'm not doing it out of a sense of benefit for me. I loved being anonymous. I was having the best time writing these books, making these translations, sharing the insights anonymously as, well, Yada. So I guess that wasn't terribly anonymous now that we know that God uses that name. But I did it for years and years, first 10 years that I was devoted to this mission when Yahweh asked me to begin it by writing these books, protecting his people from Islam, and then writing the books on Paul and Twistianity, 5 volumes here again, to protect God's people from the religion that has harmed them longer and more egregiously than any other. And then after writing those 10 volumes, I would write another 25 translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls to bring you God's Torah teaching and insights from his prophets, as well as the story that is told in the Mizmor. That's what I'm doing for you now. And that is why God has designated me as his voice to you. And you might say, well, why didn't he pick a Jew? their diction of the Hebrew words might be better, but no, it would be worse because you've changed the alphabet. You have replaced the O sound of the Wah with a V. You can't even pronounce Yahweh's name anymore because you butchered it. You've got these stupid diacritical marks that you think are intelligent. They were written in the 11th century. The Hebrew alphabet has 5 vowels and 20 of the 22 letters, 17 consonants. So no, you couldn't have pronounced Yahweh's name or even Dode's name. You replace the W with a V. No V in Hebrew. But the reason that it's me, not you, talking to you is because God's very clear through the prophets. You may want to read them sometime. He said that he searched and he found no one willing to listen to him. Why? Because you're too damn occupied praying. God never asks anyone to pray. It's annoying. He doesn't want to be worshiped. He doesn't want you to pray to him. He doesn't want you to bow down to him. None of that. He wants you to listen to him, and there wasn't a single Yehud, not a single Yisraelite that was willing to listen to him. So I got the job. And I accepted it. And I've devoted the past 24 years of my life, every waking hour, to it. And I will continue to do so for the next 8.5. And then I think from that point on, we have a new beginning. And the story goes on even more magnificently. Now, I would also remind you, and I've done this before, but was Adam a Jew? Chakmah? Cain, Abel? Nope. Was Noah a Jew? His sons, his wives? Was Abram a Jew? Sarah? They were Babylonians, weren't they? Lot? Babylonians. Was Ishak a Jew? Esau or Jacob? Their wives? They went back to Haran, didn't they? They married the descendants of Abraham and Sarah's relatives and families. All of the people who conveyed Yahweh's narrative to us at the beginning were Goyim. Almost everything in Yahweh's story comes full circle. And he is concluding where he began. Just as we began in a life in Eden where there was no politics and no religion, no rabbis. We're returning to the conditions of the Garden of Eden. Yahweh told us so. We re-enter the Garden of Eden, those of us who accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, embrace Yahweh's name, accept what Dode, his son, has done for us on Sukkah, a Shabat, full lunar eclipse that night, the 7th of October of 2033. Yeah, I know that you think that we're not 8.5 years away from year 6,000 Yah because you've been fooled by Maimonides who served Muslims, educated by Muslims, came up with a scheme of the sanctification of the moon and his fascination with the Islamic repeat of the number 19. And rather than base his chronology on the Torah, based it upon Islamic religious mumbo jumbo. And he's off by 250 years. I base my timeline on what the Torah says. I'm right. I prove it. So this will ultimately occur if you consistently and actually listen. It is shama shama. One of the crazinesses of being Israeli is that you say the shama twice a day. And I just clap my head, and you still probably don't even get how stupid that is. It says, listen, Yisrael. Listen, Yisrael. It doesn't say yibber yabber, Yisrael. It doesn't say repeat this by rote, Yisrael. And it sure as hell doesn't say Hashem or the Lord. Listen, Yisrael. Yahweh is God. Yahweh is one. Listen. That's why you're not the ones conveying this message. Get it through your thick skulls. You've been wrong for 3,000 years. Continuing to be wrong is not going to take you to right. I had a person who was Jewish because he wrote about Hashem. And he says, I read one of your first posts, and I thought maybe this guy's onto something. Then I read the rest of your otherworldly rants. And I'm here to tell you that Israel's going to come back to Hashem, and you better get your act together. It's the same thing when I find online Israelites that are spokespeople doing the right thing, trying to protect Israel from all of the enemies that it has in the world today. And it's between Muslims, 2 billion of them, a billion progressives that are serving as their pimps. You've got 3 billion people that despise you. My wife is Jewish, and she thinks this is funny. Well, that's all a progressive is a Muslim pimp. And what they're pimping is genocide, the death of Jews. Palestine, which you continue to use, and even in Israel, is nothing but a slogan to annihilate Israel. It's not an identity. It's a slogan. Let's annihilate Israel and kill every Jew. That's what Palestine means. You don't listen to your prophets. You just don't listen. When you told God to go away, we don't want to hear from you anymore. And then you continue to beat up on Moshe every step of the way. And one poor Moshe just said, God, you might as well just kill me. I can't do this job. It's impossible. Nobody can do this job. Why in the world did you bring me in here to do this job? These people are impossible. He wasn't just having a meltdown. He gave up. And you guys were what, a week away from Towrah at that point? And we're headed to the meltdown of Meribah? Oh my God. What's it going to take for you to recognize that the Torah is the story of Jews acting badly, of not listening to God? And the prophets is the story of you continuing to irritate God by being religious, and him finally saying, I'm going to give up. But in the end, I'm going to do something that is extraordinary. I'm going to equip a goy with the 7 spirits of Yahowah, such that he can figure this out by reading what the prophets have written, tell you the whole story from beginning to end, and that he is going to be my voice. And times are going to get so bad for Israel, the Jews begin to listen again. That's why this says what it says. That's why we're here. Respond or die. Respond and live, or continue to be irascible, pig-headed, stubborn, stiff-necked, and you're going to die. Now, there's something worse than dying. You could be a rabbi, leading people away from God, pretending to speak for Hashem, and you aren't going to die. spend eternity in Sheol. That's why they deny it. God doesn't deny it. Well, for those who have listened to other programs, you know that Zechariah 6 is about the 4 chariots that are spiritual chariots that come out of heaven. They're filled with ruach. There's 4 ruach in them. And that those ruach, each of the 4 has a specific mention, a specific intent and purpose. The red chariot is the Adam of Parah, this bloody red man of Edom, who saves many. It stays right there in Jerusalem. It's me. I'm going to tell Yahweh's 7 spirits to stand down. The Malach who have protected me, even though I've received thousands of death threats, to allow me to be vulnerable. And it's the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan on the Temple Mount overlooking the city of Dod that is going to bludgeon me and take my life. And it's what God does with the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah that transforms the mortal remnant of Israel, this adulterous woman, so that you're ready to be betrothed to your king. That's what happened on Towrah. Then there is a black and a white chariot, with the black chariot ending the lives of those of you who continue to be belligerent, who continue to be stiff-necked, who continue to pretend that there is a Hashem and speak of an Adonai and continue to pray as opposed to listen, who await an unknown, unnamed Messiah when the actual Messiah is the single most named person in all of the Torah and prophets, and that it's Dod. You start recognizing the 5 terms of the covenant and realize that the benefits of the covenant are delivered through the Moed Mikre. And you know what the Moed Mikre represent for the first time. For example, you celebrate the high holy days when there's nothing holy, and you begin it with Rosh Hashanah, which is a Babylonian New Year, as opposed to Towrah. You let the Twistians steal Shabuah for you and rename it Pentecost, so you don't even want to talk about it anymore. You don't like Bakurim because it speaks of firstborn children. You don't think God can have a child. Did you ever wonder why God called you the children of Israel? Why do you think God called Dod his son and he said, I am his father 3 times, if it's impossible? Who do you think lied? Yahweh or Maimonides? That last, that white chariot, it is responsible for fulfilling Yashaya, Isaiah 17, where God lists all of the places around the world that he's going to retrieve Israelites in Yehudim, all that have the possibility of being receptive to this message. He's going to bring them all back in a spiritual chariot. There'd be no other mode of conveyance at that time. There's not going to be scheduled airline flights. The world's going to be at war. You can't book a cruise. God's going to gather you on Towrah so you can be there for the sacrifice of the red heifer. You're going to be able to witness Eliah's great speech. You're going to see Yahweh ignite the flames, and the flames are going to singe all of those who have come to assault Israel, destroying them, incinerating them, returning all of the ground that is behind these belligerents back into Eden with them gone. And then he's going to ignite enormous amounts of flames and release waters from the Temple Mount, and the ash, the flames, the waters are going to purge the religious guilt of the surviving remnant that has been brought back in the white chariot, such that the dapple chariot takes its leisure time because all it's doing is collecting goyim, whose attitude and aptitude will be of use during the millennial Shabat, but they don't inherit Israel. So the people that are being talked about in this particular statement, they're the payload that are carried in that white chariot of Zechariah 6. You can dial back a few programs. I'm the first person to explain what each of those chariots represent and the timing that they operate and what they will achieve. And it's specific that the white chariot resolves coming out of Babylon. Remember, Yirmiah tells you to come out of Babylon. It is the white chariot that brings you back if you are still in diaspora. Once in Israel, gathered on olives so that you can overlook Moriah, because a replica of the tent of the restoring witness is going to be set on top of Moriah, where the old temple once stood. And of course, it faces the east, and therefore the ultimate stadium to look on will be on the hillside of olives. This is where you'll be purged and cleansed if you're a remnant of Israel. It is where Yahweh and Dod will return 10 days later, with the king having the great honor of building Yahweh's home, probably of light at that time. And we get to assist, building the royal residence, the temple, for an engaging and enduring in the home of Yahweh. Now, in the process, those who are returning will be inducted to the covenant and introduced to Yada. There'll be no question as to who God chose and why he chose this man. And I was going to say that if you have any issue with my diction, I would ask you to consider what was the one thing that Moshe said that would be his excuse as to why he could not serve Yahweh and being his voice 3,450 years ago. It was his diction, was it not? And have you ever considered the correlation between Moshe not having perfect diction and Moshe being the person who introduced Yahweh's name to us, telling us that it was God's one and only name, telling us even that it was based on the verb haya, so we'd know how to pronounce it, revealing it in the Torah, giving us the pronunciation even of the YAHOWah, and how that stacks up against the myth that we can't say Yahweh's name because no one knows how to pronounce it. That hits you somewhere in here. Or the very fact that in the 22nd Mizmor Psalm, where Dod speaks in medical terms of the way that crucifixion actually kills, and he speaks of his hands and his feet being pierced with the nails of crucifixion, the rabbis deliberately, purposefully, knowingly changed this piercing of his hands and feet to a lion that was ripping, just so that you won't know that it was Dod who was crucified, because Dod writes the entire psalm in first person. And since what I'm telling you is irrefutable, why do you believe them and you don't believe your king? Well, at that time, you're going to know the king's herald. That is my job. I serve him. Yeah, by the time that Dod returns, I'm not the guy anymore. Dod's the guy. I'll be delighted and I will serve him. We'll all serve him. He is our king. He is the Son of God. It is his throne that Yahweh was establishing for all time. And you might say, wait a minute, Dod, had his issues. The Bathsheba story is pretty terrible. The way that he responded to his son's coup against him, not so good. The fact that he sent people down just because he liked the taste of the water in Bethlehem better than other places. And that wasn't good when God gave him three choices, one of which would cause no harm to anyone. He chose the wimpy one, and people died. Yeah, Dod made a lot of mistakes. He said, I've got more faults than I have hair on my head. I used to have a lot of hair on my head too until I started this YAHOWAH blog, and I will tell you that that social media and turning on lights, speaking 2 and 3 hours a day, extemporaneously to you, and a live feed, it'll take the hairs off your head. And what you don't realize is that Dowd was made right with God because he was right about God, and that he took his guilt as well as all of our guilt and deposited in Sheol, which made him perfect. God's got a very prudent way of resolving our religious guilt, but you've got to take advantage of it. So at that time, this time that is being discussed here, everyone's going to know that Yahweh has sent me to you. And so if you listen, really listen, Shama Shama, you will hear the Kol voice of Yahweh, your God. And you will be able to celebrate with us. And if I may, unlike the famed Shema Yisrael, this time it is Shama Shama, and an exponential expression of listening to the voice of Yahweh. And soon as would be wonderful, because of the work that Elia and I do and Dowd does, Israel will be prepared to listen to the voice of Yahweh again. And, I will be taken down a notch very gleefully and will serve as a teacher for the mortal remnant, since most of them will be babes in the covenant, and for their children after them. And so there's a job to do. As the rod of divine judgment, I also have the job of serving as the gatekeeper of Sheol. And it's more than just determining who goes to Sheol and who does not. But for those that were the most abusive to God's people, for all of those, for example, that were raped, tortured, that witnessed their children have fingers and toes cut off, burned alive, for all of the horrible, horrible activities, the abduction of women who had been tortured, raped, and then dragged through the streets to cheering crowds in the Islamic Gaza, everyone that cheered, everyone that perpetrated those crimes is not going to go directly to hell. And I've been assigned the task, according to Yahweh, of inflicting the proper retribution upon them prior to sending them to hell. And the reason for that is that to be just, God must do this. And second, those people who were tormented, they need to know that those who did this to them have been held accountable. There's a survivor, and I think they call it Eurovision. I don't pay much attention to these things, but that is in a song fest in Europe, in anti-Semitic Europe. There was one of 12 people in a concrete bunker. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of it, the video, but the Muslims shot the video. And that had grenade after grenade tossed down. There were 12 of them in that bunker. And they shot rifles into it, screaming Allahu Akbar. And 11 of the 12 were killed. The survivor, hiding under dead bodies for hours and hours and hours while the IDF didn't show up, is now representing Israel. And it's one of the great stories ever. And those people need closure. They need to know that the people who did this to them are held accountable by God. And that's my job. And so it goes on beyond calling you home, telling you the story, the whole story, so that you know it, giving you the opportunity to read about it or listen to it, whatever your pleasure might be. And now, while this is the end of this chapter, it wasn't the last word on the future of Yehudim to listen. The religious and political will not have considered anything that I've shared with you, and they will not have listened to God's voice. Therefore, addressing those who will have perished, estranged from the covenant, our Creator reveals. But they resisted, and they refused to listen or respond. While ma'an la kashab, they simply wouldn't pay attention. They would not accept the advice. They acted like Jews have acted for 3,400 years and would not reply. They failed over a protracted period of time to heed what was being said and have suffered as a result of not accepting this information. Written in the Peel Imperfect. They gave the gift. It's being offered to you freely. A defiant and obstinate shoulder. Their ears became heavy, and they would not listen. Is that you? Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to recognize that you have been misled for 3,400 years? That while God chose you, you have not chosen him in return, that you have arrogantly and foolishly erased his name from your lives, that you've ignored all that he has done for you, and that now you're up against it. Listen now or never. Well, this will be the conclusion of this episode, part 18 of our YAHOWAH blog on the Chakmah Choter. I thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you this evening. Good night.